we're going to be looking at, obviously, this week is Perashat Masei, and closing up Sefer Bamidbar. Oh, everyone shuts off their screen. I hate when everyone shuts off their screen. Okay, talking to myself. All right. Anyways, Parashat thanks, Ovadia. Parashat Matot Masei, and part of the right at the end of Masei, the end of Sefer Bamidbar, almost the last thing we leave off with, we have a command with regards to the cities of the Levi'im, and then we transition into what's called Arei Miklat, the cities of Miklat, which I want to leave untranslated for now because I think that's going to be really going to be what we're talking about. What does the word Miklat mean? It might seem like a little bit of a technical thing. It's a definition of a word, but it's going to have important implications. And so let's just read through the basic story that we have here, and then we'll see the other context that we have. So we have Vaydaber Adonai Moshe be'arvot Moav Yarden Yericho lemor. So this is context is right on the bank of the Yarden, basically. Arvot Moav, this is the last stop of Bnei Israel before they go into the desert. And he says, command the people of Israel to do the cities for the Levi'im. And then it talks about the size of the cities and how you have to have basically like a field around it. We're not going to get into that. But then it says here, in Pasuk Vav, and of the cities that you're going to give to the Levi'im, Shesh Arei Miklat, Shesh Arei HaMiklat, Asher Titenu Lanu Sham Harotzeach, Vatelem Titenu 42 years. So there's going to be a total of 48 cities. 6 of those cities are also going to be Arei Miklat. We're going to see that. Well, we're not going to see it, but the halakha actually is that all 48 cities are Arei Miklat, but there is a substantial difference between the 6 cities that are defined as only Arei Miklat or primarily Arei Miklat, whereas the other 42. But that's on the side. Okay, and then we continue talking about the Arei Halvi'im. And now we're going to transition into Arei Miklat per se, and from now on we're not going to really talk about the Levi'im anymore. So it's a new command. When you go into the land, you're going to establish for yourself Arei Miklat. What is the purpose of these cities? For an unintentional murderer to flee there. And these cities are going to be limiklat, as a miklat for the goel, meaning from the avenger, right? So basically the rule is that the avenger, the closest relative of the deceased, the person who was killed accidentally or negligibly, has an opportunity to kill the murderer, the unintentional murderer. And these cities are going to be basically runaway cities, escape cities for the murderer to run to. Okay, and he says, 6 of them, 3 on one side of the Yarden and 3 on the other side of the Yarden. Now that completely separate issue. The populations were not half and half, so why are there 3 on one side and 3 on the other? Completely different topic. The Bnei Yisrael Lager, it's for everyone. Now the next 8 Pesukim describe what is bishgaga and what is intentional, right? So it has to be, if he just hits him with an iron, thing, then he's a rotzeach, he's just the murderer. If it was, right, and we're not going to go through, if he hits him with a stone, right? If he hits him with any sort of utensil that's, usually hit to kill someone, and that's what he got hit with, then it's probably going to be that he's a rotzeach. And then the goel hadam, right? Anyways, this is defining what's mezid, what's shogeg. Obviously, these are all just the broad categories. The Gemara is basically going to decide when is it shogeg, when is it mezid, and the most important, or probably the broadest category, is when is it karov lemezid, right? It's not completely unintentional, but it's also he wasn't really careful. So that's karov lemezid. And the question of the Gemara is going to be, where do we put that? But we're not really going to get into that. What we're going to talk about is the idea of the Arei Miklat as a whole. So if we skip down here, we have V'hitzilu ha'eda tarotzeach miyad goel adam. והשיבו אותו אל עיר מקלטו אשר נשמה וישב בה אדמות הכהן הגדול אשר משך אותו בשמן הקודש. So the Edah, which is really the court, is going to save him from the Goel Hadam and place him in his Ir Miklat that he ran away to, and until the Kohen Gadol dies. If the guy leaves the city, he's free game. Then the guy could kill him. Right? Everyone should be familiar with these laws. They're pretty straightforward. Okay? This is going to be the Chukat Mishpat L'Dorotechem B'chol Moshevotechem. And then it goes into what happens if it's not a bishkaga, it's an intentional kill. So then you can't be lenient with him and let him go into, right? Lo tichul kofer lanusir il miklato. You can't take a bribe. He'll tell you, oh no, I don't want to get the death penalty. I'd rather go to an ir miklat. Here's, $100. We'll put him in an ir miklat. It says the Torah, you can't do that. That would be what's called chanafata aretz, is polluting the land or disgracing the land. And don't defile the land, because I am God and I dwell amongst it. And as long as there's a murderer walking around, it's not going to be cleansed. So that's the basic law. That's the basic structure as it appears in our parasha. But we have, I should mention, this class is basically adapted from a shiur from Rav Elchanan Samet, one of the rabbis, and now he works in Ma'ale Adumim as well, but he's also from the Gush. And he basically points out, he says, the truth is that in the Torah we have 4 places where the concept of a city of refuge for an accidental killer is mentioned. So we have it in Perashat Mishpatim. And here it's very, abbreviated. Makeh ish v'met mot umat. Person kills someone, death penalty. V'asher lo sada. And if he wasn't trapping him, meaning it wasn't premeditated or it wasn't something that he intended, v'ha Elohim min al yado. The way a lot of people translate this is, and it came to be from God, meaning it was accidental. It wasn't something premeditated. V'samti lecha makom. I am going to, this is in the name of Moshe, in the name of God, right? That I am going to provide for you a place, asher yanu shama, for this person to run away to, meaning the accidental murderer. That's how it appears the first time in Shemot, which is basically like a glimpse into the law that's going to come out in the future, that's going to be expanded on in the future. Then we have our parasha, which we just read. And then in Devarim, it happens twice. The first is at the end of Parashat Vayet Hanan, not the end, the middle of Parashat Vayet Hanan, but it comes at the end of Moshe's, we'll call it, introductory speech. It's sort of the bridge between the introductory speech and the next, section of Sefer Devarim, which is going to be a little bit of his expansion on the mitzvot. And here, it's not necessarily a command of the mitzvah, it's more of a explanation or a story about what Moshe actually does. Then Moshe separated 3 cities on the other side of the Yarden, and all the commentators say, right, why did Moshe do this? He wanted to show Bnei Israel how chavivin the mitzvot, how much he wanted to be a part of doing the mitzvot. He led by example here by doing it himself. He knew he wasn't going to get the opportunity to do it when he crossed, because he wasn't crossing the Yarden. So he did it himself. And what are the purpose of these cities that Moshe set up? He didn't hate him. He didn't have a prior hatred for him. It was some sort of accident, some sort of mistake. That's what this guy, he gets to run there. And then it tells you the name of the cities. Fine. Then the last instance in the Torah that we have is in Devarim Yud Tet. It's Parashat Shoftim, and here it takes on a little bit of a different form. It's less from the perspective of the people involved, but more from the government side, about what the government and what the leadership needs to do in providing for these cities. And it says like this: Shalosh arim tavdil lach betoch artzecha asher Adonai lecha noten lecha l'rishta. Set up 3 cities in your land that God is giving you for an inheritance, and make tachin lecha derech, make sure that the pathways to these cities are very clear. It should be equally divided throughout the land. It shouldn't be that there's 3 right next to each other. Rather, divide the land into 3 and try and put them as equidistant as possible from every place. And that's the matter of the Rotzeach, that he's going to run there. And then again, it defines what is considered biflidat, without knowledge. And then it says, what's the purpose? Why do we need these cities? Because we don't want what's called the Goel Hadam, the avenger of the blood, meaning the relative of the deceased, to chase after the Rotzeach, ki yeham nebavo, v'hisigo, and he's going to catch him. Why? Because you, the government, was negligent because because you put one city in such a complicated place and there was no clear signs and there was no clear road how to get there, that this accidental murderer is wandering around and the Goel Hadam catches him, and that is going to end up being your fault. And his decree is not for death, rather, he is supposed to just run away to the city of refuge, and it would end up being your fault because you didn't provide him the opportunity. So that's how the mitzvah appears in the Torah. And the general thing that we see from these instances, all the ones that we read, is that there's a difference between real murder and accidental murder. A real murderer gets the death penalty, and accidental murderer gets this special law where he runs away, he goes away from wherever he was living and has to live in a city. And if he leaves that city, the Goel Hadam, the avenger, can kill him. And on his way to that city, the avenger can kill him. And also we see that these cities we'll call them Arei Miklat, have a very special, it's only for this kind of person. It's not for anyone else. If a murderer goes into there, then he can get taken out and given his punishment. That's really the picture that emerges from here. What's interesting, though, is that if we go back, and I have it here, if we go back to our parasha is the only place where that word miklat actually appears. The word miklat, despite the fact that we're talking about the same thing, does not appear in any of the other contexts. It's either samti lecha makom or arim, or again, arim, right? It doesn't have this idea of miklat. So what does the word miklat mean? So Michael Salem, because you are somewhat of a modern Hebrew speaker, what does the word miklat mean? At least in modern Hebrew.
Shelter.
Good. A shelter, right? Every house has, or every apartment building has miklat sign. It's a place for you to go if there's a bomb attack or something, right? Miklat means a shelter. And if we go back, we see that that's how the Onkelos translates V'yat kirvayan, these cities, di tetenun leleva'eh, that you're going to give to the Levi'im. Yat shit kirve shezavuta, these 6 cities of shezavuta, like we say in the Kaddish, shezava rufuah, right? The 6 cities of, shelter or refuge or something like that. So that's what it is. However, it seems like there's something a little bit more going on, because if we look back into these Pisukim, really the Pisukim are divided into 2 main sections that we care about. And there's Yud Aleph through Tet Vav, and then there's Kaf He to Lamed Bet. And each time the word Miklat appears 5 times, but with different functions. So if we see here, it says Vikritem Lachem Arei Arim, Arei Miklat, cities of Miklat. And then it says again that these cities are going to be Limiklat Migoel, for a refuge from the Goel. And then again, Shesh Arei Miklat, Limiklat. So in 5 Pisukim, 5 verses, you have the phrase appear 5 times. That's significant. And then it defines in the middle who is a Shogeg and who is a Mezid. And then again, 5 Pisukim, or 7 Pisukim, sorry. And here it has the word Miklat again, but it's a little bit different. Here it's V'heshiva oto ha'eda il ir miklato, to his ir miklat. V'im yatzo yetzer rotzech el gvul ir miklato. Umatzah oto goel adam, his city of refuge. Why is it his city of refuge? Because here we're talking about, and if this law was accomplished and he reached his place, right? And what his law is when he's living in his place, it becomes his city of refuge. So the word miklat here is what's called in Hebrew Milat Manha. It's the guide word to understand what's going on here. It's the word that appears 10 times in this whole story, in this whole law. And if we want to really understand what this idea of the balance between the Shogeg killer and the Goel Adam, you have to understand what the word Miklat really means in all its capacities. So like we said, the Onkelos translated as some sort of relief. And the problem with translating or trying to find the right translation, usually what do you do when you need Sammy? What do you do when you want to find out what a word means in Tanakh? Sammy? Sammy wants to say, but he's not figuring out how to do it technologically. Sammy wants to say that if you want to find out what a word means, you have to look for the other places in Tanakh in which it appears. Sammy, are you even with us?
No. You use the concordance.
Good, concordance. Very good. So the only problem is that the word miklat, or any, miklato, or anything like that, only appears in the context of accidental murders in these cities. So either here or the other 3 instances we found in the Torah, or it appears in Yehoshua where they're setting up the Arei Miklat, or it appears in Divrei Hayamim where they're describing the process of the setting up of the Arei Miklat. So it doesn't really help us. So we need something else because there's no other way. So if we go to, let's just, before we go to the other context, if you see here in Yehoshua, like I told you, it describes it. It says, give these cities of Miklat, the Misudat Zion here, basically playing off of Chazal, have a different understanding of the word, or even the Shoresh, Kof Lamitet. Really, in rabbinic language, which is not the same as the Torah, they operate in different language frameworks. Miklat can mean something like an absorption, or to catch even, or to receive, right? So if you have here, he's describing hamiklat, right? And he's saying, Al-Shem shekoletet et harotzchim. It absorbs or takes in the murderers. It's not the way of other cities to take in murderers. This city is unique because it absorbs murderers into it. That's what makes it unique about the city. Right? He's clearly not saying that it means save. It doesn't mean like the Unkelus is saying shezavuta, because what is it? Of course, it's not the way of other cities to save murderers, and that's not right. That wouldn't make sense, right? So it means it's not the way of other cities to open their doors to absorb people in, to absorb murderers in. So fine. And that's exactly this is based on the Mishnah and Masechet Makot, where it seems to be pretty clear that the word kolet, or the word to, miklat, is to absorb a person into the society, not to save them. Now you might say, what's the difference? We'll have to talk about that in a second. It might be a small difference, but it might be significant. So let's look at another place where we don't have the word miklat, but we have the shoresh kuf lamitet, and that's with regards to animals that are not fit to be brought on the Mizbeach. And here we have v'shor v'aseh sarua v'kalut nidavat haseoto ulneder lo yatzeh. You have a ox or a sheep, and if it's sarua v'kalut, we don't know what those terms mean, but there's some blemish in the animal. Nidavat haseoto ulneder lo yatzeh. You can, at least according to the Pshat of the Pasuk, Midrash might go in a different direction, but meaning just translating the Pasuk as literally as possible. And nidavat aseh, you can do it as a korban nidava, which means I could offer it as something to the Beit HaMikdash, but I can't do it as a neder. I can't bring it as a vow. The difference between a nidava and a neder, in broad strokes, being a nidava is when you declare something about the animal. This animal will be to the Beit HaMikdash, and a neder is when you declare something about yourself. I will bring an animal to the Beit HaMikdash. That's not for now, but that's the law. The Ibn Ezra over here says, what does the word sarua mean? Karishon. No, that doesn't really help us. He says, like the first one. What does that mean, like the first one? Well, we'll come back to that in a second. But then he says, v'kalut hofcho. Kalut is its opposite. So these two things are two extremes, right? Whatever is wrong with this animal, it's on two extremes. V'hu megezerat ir miklat. And the Ibn Ezra says it comes from the same root, the same, fundamental idea of ir de miklat. So he's the one who links us, this kalut, to ir miklat. So what does it mean? We still don't know what sarua or kalut means. Once we find out what sarua means, we'll be able to find out what kalut means, because the Ibn Ezra said that they're opposites. So there's another place where sarua comes in the perek before, right? This is Vayikra Kav Bet, this is Vayikra Kav Aleph. And there it's not talking about the animals that have a blemish, but rather the kohanim. Kohanim have a certain blemish. And over there it says like this: Kikol ish asher bomum lo yikrav ish iver ofisech o charum o sarua. Anyone that has a physical deformity or blemish, lo yikrav, he cannot be a kohen. He still maintains his Kohen status, but he cannot serve in the Beit HaMikdash. Ish iver o fiseach, if he's lame or Piseach is lame, Iver is blind, or Harum, or he's Harum, or Sarua. Here also, we don't know what these words Harum or Sarua mean. Harum says the Ibn Ezra, I didn't bring it here, but he says that it comes from the word Herem, which means, disabled or something like that. But Sarua says the Ibn Ezra, which is the same word that we had to describe the animal, which is our important word, because we know kalut is going to be the opposite of this word, as the Ibn Ezra said. Sarua, says the Ibn Ezra, migezerat mihistareya. It comes from the same word of mihistareya. Okay, he's sending us on a little bit of a wild goose chase here. So he tells us, go look at the pasuk in Yeshayahu, where from the word mihistareya. And he's basically telling us, what he's doing here is saying, I cannot tell you what it means until I find a pasuk that's clear what it means from the context, and then we'll just play the game and go backwards. But I can't just tell you, Sarua is no good, and then just tell you what it means. I have to tell you where I got this. So he's just telling you, go to Mihistareya. Where is that pasuk? Here. And here the message is clear. It says Yeshayahu, Ki kasar hamatzah Mihistareya. The bed, or the sheets, are too short, or too histareya. What does it mean there? To basically stretch yourself out. So imagine you're sleeping in like a crib, or if you're very tall and you sit on a bed and the mattress is too narrow to contain you. And the sheets, they're too not short, but here they're narrow. So imagine you're with a blanket that's too narrow to cover yourself. So here the meaning of the word mihistareya is very clear. It means to stretch yourself out, to expand yourself. So if that's what the the Ibn Ezra is telling us sarua means, now we go back to our original pasuk. V'short vaseh sarua v'kalut. An animal that is deformed in such a way that it is too large, meaning its body looks strange because its legs are so much longer or larger than its rest of the body that it looks deformed. And he said that the kalut means the opposite, that it's, a dwarf animal, basically. It can't be brought as a korban. So the word kalut here, now what we'll say is the shoresh kalut, kuf lamed tet, means to be mitzamsem, to diminish, to shrink, to pull into yourself, to be, in English, the word to dwarf, right? To be a dwarf is to be someone that's, small, and to be dwarfed is also to be made small. So that's what we're talking about here. So now to bring this all back to our Pisukim, perhaps another layer of meaning to what the word miklat means is not just that it's a refuge from the killer, because it certainly does mean that, because it says, V'hayu lachem ha'arim limiklat migoel, right? It's coming to be a miklat from the goel. However, it could also mean that it's basically this person's life has become shrunk or shrunken. The person who is now the accidental killer, on the one hand, he needs an escape place. He needs a plan to not get killed. But on the other hand, this is Arei Miklat, run away to there, you're safe. It's home base, basically. However, there's another piece to the puzzle, and that's basically the Torah saying, when you're there, this is going to be your new world. You're no longer in the world. You no longer inhabit the world with everyone else. Your world is limited to this little city. This is your new world. And so much so that the Mishnah actually says he's not allowed to leave. He can't leave. It's not like he can, and it's not just because we're concerned that someone's going to kill him. Right? You could get bodyguards, or maybe they made up or whatever. He's still, he has to stay there. So if there's a court case and they need him to testify, he can't do it. He's not allowed. This is now his new place of living. It's his new existence. And he lives within this city, so much so that the Gemara says that this is his new life, right? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Maikra, but the Gemara over here is discussing all the things that these cities have to have. So they have to have water sources, and they have to have markets, and they have to have places to shop, and all these basic necessities of life. And the Gemara asks, what's the pasuk, proving that? Because it says, He has to run away to all these cities and live there. Why does it say and live there? To teach us avid le midi de teheve le lechiyuta. You have to do things that he can have his life there. You could provide for life there, which means to say, it's not just he's running away to a place, home base, and he just can be free there, and that's all we need to do. But we actually need to provide a city that he can live in, that he can now, because he's not going to leave. This is his new place of life, is in this city. So what's the, okay, Azaku Baruch, very nice. Now there's two different dimensions to Arei Miklat. One is, and by the way, this is what's pointed out in the Pesukim, that once he's there, it becomes Arei Miklato. It's his, right? It keeps saying Arei Miklato, his city of Miklat, right? It means it's his life, it's his place of living. His world is now shrunken into this existence. So who cares? What's the whole point of this whole discussion? So first of all, it helps us understand a lot of the dinim, a lot of the laws, a lot of perplexing laws that come up with Arei Miklat, one of the ones I already mentioned. And it also helps us understand the balance between the Torah providing the place for the Goel Hadam, meaning giving him some level of opportunity to take out his vengeance, but more importantly, the balance on the side of the accidental murderer to say, okay, I need you, you're going to have a situation where you're still going to have a life, but you're no longer really part of the rest of society. And also, you can't leave, meaning there's two reasons why he can't leave. He can't leave because the Goel Adam is going to kill him. And he also can't, and he's also safe in this Arei Miklat because the Goel Adam can't come in and kill him. So in a certain sense, he's completely protected, but he's also completely limited, right? The same thing that offers his protection is the thing that limits him. And I think that is a huge, huge piece to keep in mind in general in life, and I'm going to expand it in a second. But the things that are protecting him are the things that are also limiting him. The fact that he has to live in this city because he needs protection is also means that this is my entire life, the gates of this city. Now, if we expand this, we see that the name of how we treat this punishment in the Mishnah is Elu Hen Hagolim. These are the people that go into exile. It's not a matter of these are the people who run away. These are the people who go into exile. These are the people who are leaving their real existence and now being shrunken into some other level of existence. And it seems to be that this is what it means, modern day perhaps, to be in exile. It means that you might be protected. You might have a nice shtetl, you might have a nice community, you might have a nice thing. You're very well, you're completely good in your little area. You're good. Your world does not need to be expanded. You have your little supermarket, you have your water source, you have anything. The bad guys aren't going to come in because you're protected by all sorts of laws. But at the end of the day, guess what? The same thing that is offering you protection is also limiting what you're able to do, because now your world is limited. Your ability to expand into the world, to impact the world, to leave your Arei Miklat, to leave your place, your world, right, is limited. And to keep the metaphor going, in the world of ideas, in the world of culture, it's you're scared to leave because you're going to get killed by someone on the outside, right? Your whole identity is going to be destroyed by what's on the other side of the Arei Miklat. Yes, Sammy, go for it.
If I'm not mistaken, that's the term that modern Hebrew is using for a bomb shelter.
Yeah, we said that in the beginning, that the word miklat is a bomb shelter. Yeah. So, did you want to say something else after that, or are you saying the same kind of idea, just expanding it, that you're scared of someone from the outside killing you? So
you got cut off. I missed what you said, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So I think this is, especially during this time of year where we have that we're thinking about what are we actually losing when we're losing the Beit HaMikdash, right? And it's not just a Beit HaMikdash, it's an entire idea of sovereignty and deciding our own future and not living in a limited way. We're not living right now we should feel as if we're somewhat limited in our abilities to really have an impact on the world, to really push things where they need to go and to really affect the world around us and to build a society we're really sort of just keeping things going amongst ourselves in our nice little community bubbles and our nice, but we're not really we're not living up to what perhaps we can. And it's because we need protection. And that's a valid thing, because you have to have protection, because if you don't have protection, you're going to get killed by the Goel Adam. Again, this is keeping the metaphor going. The Goel Adam represents the thing that's going to kill you if you're not careful. And so we need to have these protections, but at the same time, we have to realize that the same things that are offering us our protections are the same things that are limiting us severely from really being able to live. And I think that this, the law of the Torah says that the accidental murderer has to stay in the Arei Miklat until the Kohen Gadol dies. And there's all sorts of reasons given. Why did the Torah give the punishment of the Kohen Gadol's death? What is that about? And so famously, the Rambam has, in Moreh Nevuchim, gives his answer that when the Kohen Gadol dies, there's going to be a great tragedy amongst the Jewish people. And people, times of tragedy, times of mourning, they forget their prior, vendettas. They forget their anger. They come together. And so that event is is an opportunity to bring out the Goel Adam, to bring the Goel Adam and the accidental murderer together and say, all right, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones and we'll work it out, because they already feel this coming together for some purpose, especially the death of someone important. But perhaps we could even say a little bit different, that it's not just about that, but it's also the accidental murderer was removed from the world. He was basically said, you can't live on this plane anymore. We need to put you in your own little world, and you're going to stay there until the Kohen Gadol dies, because when the Kohen Gadol dies, the world that you were removed from is not the same world anymore. And this sort of connects basically the Rambam's answer with the way the Gemara formulates it, is that the Kohen Gadol, it was on his head that sort of this accident happened. He should have been a better leader. He should have been a better, whatever it is, but it's on his head. He should have prayed harder. He's somewhat responsible. He's somewhat culpable. So we have to wait for him to die to allow the Goel Adam to come. And this idea we could broaden it out and say that basically we're waiting for the world to be different. The world that the Goel Adam, the world that the accidental murderer was put into, his little jail or whatever we'll call it, his Arei Miklat. We need for him to wait until the world that he was taken out from is substantially different. That's basically defined by the death of the Kohen Gadol. And again, if we connect it to the metaphor, it seems like that's really what we've been doing for the last 2,000 years, is we've been waiting for the world to change. We've been, John Mayer, we've been waiting for Mashiach. We've been waiting for all these things to happen. And that's our unfortunate predicament. But we have to sort of, we're in a different situation. We're not completely accidental murderers. We have to try and say, okay, we have an ability to actually cause, again, in the metaphor, the Kohen Gadol to die, or to cause the world to change. And in which case, we can leave our Arei Miklat because we've actually changed the world around us. And perhaps, this is what we should really be thinking of in this time during Tisha B'Av and all these things. Where are we limited? How can we change the world around us so that we could limit our limitations, or that's the thing, right? Limit the things that limit us, and to really be able to expand and not be kalut, right? Not be dwarfed by the world around us. So that's the end of the class. If anyone has any questions,